So we're at the biggest game of the year, and probably not the way we expected to approach it. We thought the build-up was going to be everything for Eden Park, the Springboks and the All Blacks. And then both sides in the last 2 weeks got a bit of a blood nose. The All Blacks on Saturday against the Pumas, and Springboks won a very nervous game against Wallabies after the previous week's shock at Ellis Park. So I thought, let's just chat about how this is, how it's going. This build-up is going, and got with me old mate of mine, Jamie Wall, from all the way from Auckland. Jamie, welcome.
Kia ora, Brendan. It's great to be talking with you again. I hope you've been well, mate.
Yeah, how do I describe you other than good friend of Ben Smith?
Oh, this again. You can describe me. I'm an All Black correspondent here in Auckland for Radio New Zealand. And I'm also an author. I've written 6 books on the All Blacks, including The 100 Years' War, which is a history of the All Blacks and Springboks. Really, really proud of that one. That's probably the best one I've done. So much so that I may never write another book. It's that special to me.
Well, we're going to get you to bring some over to South Africa. Maybe next year you guys come for the greatest rivalry tour. But okay, let's turn to this week's game. Obviously, not the results both sides expected in the last 2 weeks. Just how, and we've seen some strange sort of rants going on in some radio stations there from you guys. Just how's the All Black loss being taken in your part of the world?
About as well as any All Black loss is ever taken in New Zealand, which is a mixture of anger, confusion, and I guess just everyone straining to figure out what's wrong, panicking. I guess there's a bit of panic in the air. You mentioned the other results that have happened. The Springboks losing to the Wallabies, the All Blacks losing to the Pumas. I mean, I'm going to look on the bright side here. September the 6th, when the All Blacks and Springboks meet, is probably shaping up to be, I think, the most interesting day in the history of the Rugby Championship, because now you have an informed Pumas team taking on a very, very interesting Wallabies team first up, and then you have this really, really highly anticipated match between the All Blacks and Springboks. And, no matter what the results coming in, this is still going to be huge. For no other reason than it's the first time the Springboks have been back to Eden Park since 2013, and we all remember what happened in that game. And also, that this is seen as the best chance anyone has had in the 50 tests to break the streak that the All Blacks have had at Eden Park, and also for the Springboks as well. It's a chance to win at a venue where they haven't actually won since 1937, which is quite crazy when you think about it, because during the amateur, the touring era, they'd always play there. And yes, it's true that they haven't played at Eden Park as much as anyone else, but it's also meant that this has shaped up really nicely for this really monumental fixture for them. And I think they'll be coming in here with the attitude of, like, this is kind of like a World Cup final for us, because we can really make history, and we potentially may not get another chance to do this, because if they blow this chance and someone else ends the streak, it's going to be their record, and it's not going to belong to the Springboks. And really, this sounds strange as a New Zealander, as an All Black, as someone who grew up watching the All Blacks, but it's probably a record that we want to be broken by the Springboks, by the best team that can possibly do it, rather than just slipping up against a Wallabies team or whoever else.
Yeah, I mean, we've gone through sort of periods, and I mean, with knowing the history between the two sides, we've gone through periods where it's become a bit one-sided with the 57-0, where the Springboks have probably dipped a bit more than they should, but the All Blacks have pretty much remained consistent. There is a record now, I suppose, that also counts in New Zealand's motivation, which is 4 times in a row that the Springboks have beaten them, including the World Cup final. And that's something that's probably going to be played up. We're going to hear quite a bit next week in terms of the motivation. So I'm not sure. I mean, I don't think any of us would think 5 times in a row is a fair reflection, because those games have been incredibly close, except for maybe the Twickenham game. But it's certainly going to be a massive task. And this Bok team, if they need motivation to do well, then Eden Park is certainly the one to give them that motivation. Plus, I think the fact that both teams have lost has probably been good for both teams in the lead up to this, because especially in the Springbok side, they were cruising. I think the All Blacks also had 8 or 9 wins in a row. So yeah, a little bit of introspection, a little bit of soul searching is never a bad thing. It just makes the game just a little bit bigger for all of us as well.
Yeah, that's right. It doesn't. I don't. I think that both teams will be better for the losses that they've sustained, because I think both of them exposed quite a few flaws in the way that the teams have played, and it was really interesting to see the reaction from South Africa, both from yourselves in the media and the public, who are never shy of a word on social media. Just because there seemed to be quite a lot of people saying, "Oh, I told you so." You know that this team's a bit old now. They've been playing the same way for too long, and as soon as they tried something new, they're not able to do it, because I think we saw a game plan in that loss at Ellis Park that was very un-Springbok like, and it meant that once things didn't really start going their way, they didn't really have a fallback plan. And you saw on the weekend, and the All Blacks lost to the Pumas, a real heavy reliance on what's been a very reliable set piece, to be fair. And as soon as the Pumas kind of figured that out, things just started to go all right. And so I think what you've seen in the last fortnight is two teams that have kind of tried to do things that have been kind of outside of the way that they've traditionally played, paid for it. And so now you head into this game where you would think they will both revert back to type. And we're going to see, hopefully, what's always been so great about the All Blacks and the Springboks, which is a styles clash. It's a heavyweight fight between two fighters who are very, very good at different things. And that's what makes it so good. And it's what I think, when we talk about the difference between Northern Hemisphere and Southern Hemisphere rugby, and who does it better, and the kind of perception that one way is better than the other, that's what it's been like between the All Blacks and the Springboks for the entire history, except there's been no sort of animosity, because it's more like, oh, this is great. We've got these two teams that are really good at doing different things. Let's see what happens when we put them together. So I think that will always make All Black and Springboks games that much more exciting, and why we cherish them so much. And I think that, this one, like I said, with that added pressure now, and I mean, I guess I'll throw this back on you. I'll ask you a question, like, who do you think more of the pressure's on? Because this whole streak thing has been on the All Blacks since like the 2011 World Cup, when people started to figure out, like, hang on, they haven't actually lost here for ages. So they've been dealing with this pressure for like the last 15 years. Now the Springboks come in, with all of the expectation on them. Who's going to handle this expectation more, do you think?
Yeah, and I think the fact that the Boks are not number one in the world is probably a good thing for them as well now. And interestingly enough, in those two defeats that we're talking about, the Wallabies played pretty much like the Springboks played, and the Pumas brought a physicality to the All Blacks. And there's a lot made about the fact that South Africa is not in Super Rugby, and on this side, I mean, we were chatting to Nick Mallett yesterday, and I asked him the question about the pace of Super Rugby and the interpretation of the referees, because we've had 2 New Zealand referees for those Wallaby games, and the Boks seem to struggle with a little bit with the pace and with that. But I mean, they'll obviously know that by the time they get to Auckland, and the All Blacks, obviously, I probably haven't faced the type of physicality they faced from the Pumas in the last couple of weeks in a while as well, since they've probably faced South Africa again. So, on both sides, the different styles have been put to the test, and they'll learn from that, and they'll come, and the criticism in the public as well. I mean, because as you say, in South Africa, I think the shock was more that we probably were a bit overconfident. I mean, even I say myself, we're going to those games, maybe the Wallabies will be a bit better because they played the Lions, but I didn't think it was a particularly good Lions side. But we still should beat the Wallabies, because in the past couple of years, they come to the Highveld, they struggle with the altitude, and the Boks put them away. So I think that first game, with the way the Boks was sucker punched in that game, was a shock to a lot of people around you. And I think probably Yeah, we've lost to Argentina in Argentina a couple of times, and we know how good they are, especially at home. But the All Blacks always seem to find a way to win in Argentina, so that was quite surprising. But I know staying up till 1:30 in the morning to watch it this past weekend, that Pumas team was exceptional. And just one stat I just want to mention, maybe you can also have a word on, is when last did we see a weekend where even if the Springboks won, they missed 30 tackles and the All Blacks missed 40 tackles in the game against the Pumas? I mean, that's an unbelievable stat when I saw it afterwards.
Yeah, well, I would put an asterisk next to that All Black count because they played an awful lot of that game with 13 players, and that would have contributed greatly to that missed tackle count. And even though during that period where they were down to 13, they only conceded one penalty goal,
Yeah.
the long term effect of what all of that defending and chasing had to do to them was why they just didn't have what they usually do have at the end of games to be able to pull something out and manufacture a victory there because their legs were just gone, and you could see it in the scrum. That very good All Black scrum, very reliable All Black scrum. It didn't get like chewed up at the end there, but it offered nothing, and for a Puma scrum to just sit there about 7 meters out and Pablo Matera to just perfect platform for him to run off the back there. So it's stuff like that. It all added up to that moment, and that was the winning try that he set up there. So yeah, you're right. It's definitely not something that we want to see again from either team. I don't think we will, because I feel like this game is going to be a lot more direct. There's there's not going to be as much sort of crazy play across the fields and things, and wide counterattacks like we saw the Wallabies doing at Ellis Park and also in Cape Town as well. But I think that the lessons for both teams are pretty obvious. You don't need to be Rassie Erasmus or Scott Robertson to know what these teams both need to work on if they want to win this test at Eden Park.
Do you think, I mean, the world rankings is an interesting one. The All Blacks are number one again. And I know if I was speaking to Martin Devlin, he'd ram that down my throat the whole time. But how do you guys look at the world rankings? Because, I mean, it's obviously a sense of pride and a bit of bragging rights, but it doesn't really, I mean, it's hard to believe Argentina are seven and Australia six at the moment, for instance. So does it really mean that much? And is that something that in New Zealand is looked at the same way?
Not particularly. I think that it's nice. Like it's nice to be uh, have the number one next name. You got to remember as well that when they started those world rankings, I think the All Blacks stayed number one for like the first 6 years or something, and so it was something that was just a given for New Zealanders. When that slipped, and I guess it must have been around the 2007 World Cup, something like that. Then I remember it being a big deal back then. But the problem now, and you highlighted it when you say Argentina are ranked seventh, when they're clearly better than that, is that it's a very flawed system because you have teams right now who are playing against each other and getting ranked against teams that aren't. And you can always look at that top 10 and say, well, that's not right because the results on the weekend have painted a completely different picture as to where these teams are at. So, to answer your question, yeah, not really. You can't put a world ranking in a trophy cabinet, and it's the things in there that New Zealanders hold the most dear.
The Springboks probably biggest crisis at the moment is at number eight, and after seeing what Paulo Matera did on the weekend, there's no question that Rassie probably would want a big ball carrying number eight, which the Springboks traditionally have and haven't really had in the last 2 weeks. Jasper Wiese is still suspended. He's only going to play in Wellington probably. He's gone out with the team anyway. But and then the All Black side, it seems you guys got a bit of a crisis at halfback at nine. Just maybe just your thoughts on both of those crises. Where do you see them going?
Yeah, I mean, I'm interested in the crisis that the Springboks are having because I would have always thought that there's enough there in that Springbok loose forward mix at any given time to be able to cover that. I mean, we saw Sia Khaleesi playing number 8 in that test. I don't think because he came off injured. Was it just after half time? Is that correct?
Yeah, I got injured.
Uh,
Yeah,
he we don't I don't think we saw enough of him to know whether that was a good move or not. I mean, for all the things that happened that the Wallabies did well, you got to remember that the Springboks looked like absolutely on fire for that first 20 minutes, and he was a part of that. So if that's the fullback plan, I don't think you're really losing much putting a World Cup winning captain at number 8. So yeah, I think that the All Blacks' problems at halfback are far more probably drastic than that because we're down to almost a Stephen Donald like situation right now with Finlay Christie, who's a guy who I don't think anyone thought would be playing for the All Blacks again after the last World Cup, and is a guy who I think everyone's got an opinion on, which is kind of not great for an All Black halfback because we had such a long period of having one guy who was just locked in as the starting halfback, and the only conversation was who's going to be sitting on the bench behind him, and it was usually another guy who was good enough to start anyway. Now we have, we've got Finlay, we've potentially got Finlay Christie and Kyle Preston, who's not actually playing in this game against the Springboks, which is not ideal at all. And that's no disrespect to Finlay Christie at all, but it's like when you go from Cam Roigard uh, to basically anyone else, it's a big drop off. Cortez Rudman was pretty good in the tests that he's played this year, and I would have felt pretty good about that. But now we're looking at having two guys who weren't even picked in the original squad, and one who hasn't even played Test match, starting and being on the bench in the biggest test of the year. So I think that the problem that the All Blacks have in that position is far bigger than the one the Springboks have in upper 8.
yeah. So we're not going to see. I mean, there is a pretty decent halfback. You talked about he played for a while for the All Blacks. He's been playing up north in Japan for a while. So I mean, there could always be an SOS there. I'm sure we wouldn't be sad to see him. He's one of probably the better players I've seen in my lifetime in the 9 jersey. No chance of him coming back on the SOS.
Uh, no, because we don't have the same. We haven't relaxed our rules as much as you guys have, so I don't think we can get Aaron Smith back and legally play him under our rules. I mean, it's not the worst idea in the world. He's obviously still match fit, but there's zero chance of that actually being able to happen as long as we have Super Rugby level halfbacks available. But yeah, it's it would be had these injuries happened a little bit earlier in the year, it potentially could have worked.
I was also interested in just hearing about Scott Robertson and how sort of he's perceived around there. I know I always find it strange. I always call it the David Moyes theory, where David Moyes in football had to take over after Alex Ferguson after that excellent run. Obviously, Fozzie is not a bad coach, but having to come in after the Graham Henry, Steve Hansen era, it was always going to be difficult. And now there's a lot of expectation on Scott Robertson. We're probably going to sit with the same thing at some point when Rassie does leave, because everything's got a final point. Whoever comes after Rassie is probably going to face the same sort of problems. But just wondering how he's doing in the eyes of the New Zealand public. And because, I mean, his record's not bad. The All Blacks record's not bad. But you tend to pick up that there's still a bit of, I don't know, skepticism about Razor in the New Zealand public.
Yeah, that's a good way to describe it. I'd say like also that he he hasn't done enough yet to completely earn the trust of everybody, and that I think I personally was a bit surprised at how green he was coming in and how much he had to learn about what being a test coach, an All Black coach was, and I think all of the other responsibilities that come with it. And, you know, what Rassie has managed to do with the Springbok coaching job is essentially make it this sort of really transcendent role where he is, the figurehead of an entire country right now, and that everybody's hanging off his every word, and he has this just unbelievable support behind him because I feel like the Springboks kind of embody what South Africa sort of sees itself as, which is that a bunch of people of all the cultures sort of coming together and achieving something and being the best in the world of that, and he's at the head of that. And I don't want to tell you how your country works, but it feels like quite a strongman society that you want to look to someone who can just sort of take it by the scruff of the neck and be like, right, we're doing it this way. And I think that's why the Springboks are riding such a high wave of support right now, because obviously with it, as well as the success, you have this big personality that's driving it, that everybody's sort of buying into. I don't think Scott Robertson is anywhere sort of near that right now. I think we thought he was going to be like that because he had this whole kind of like new, youngish kind of feel about him, and he was going to take the All Blacks to somewhere where they hadn't been before, just in terms of a brand and a sort of personality. But he hasn't really done that. Like things about the team still feel very much the same as they did before. And it's almost, and like even just things like selections have been pretty conservative. He's very much erred on the side of caution. I don't have an issue with that. Like, he's made it clear he just wants to win every game. And that's what you have to do as an All Black coach. But I think we were expecting like um, some sort of big evolution of the All Blacks, and that it was going to take this big next step, and he hasn't really done that yet. And I think right now people are like, especially after a loss, like if you'd asked me this last week, I'd probably have a sort of bit more positive answer. But right now, going into this game, it does kind of feel like, okay, if you don't win this, like we're going to start asking some questions about where this team's going, who you're picking. Are we going to win? Are we going to win a World Cup? And is what's being done now in the best interests of the game in New Zealand? Because that's a whole nother aspect of it as well. And I think that he's really taking his time coming to grips with that. And the sooner he does, the better he'll be, and more comfortable he'll be in his job.
Interesting. It's very interesting. I think the last one I want to ask you is just obviously we know a lot of the All Black players, but there's quite a few new faces that I mean, if you haven't watched a lot of Super Rugby, you probably won't know them. Maybe just a player or two that you think South African fans need to watch out for in these tests. I'm thinking Billy Proctor's maybe one of them that the South African fans might not know too well. Anyone you want to also point out?
Yeah, well, I mean, if you guys are still in Super Rugby, you'd know all this. So, you can come back anytime you like. Don't worry. Yeah, I think anyone that the Springboks probably aren't that didn't play against, didn't play in those tests last year. Billy Proctor's certainly one of them. He's probably a guy with a bit of a question mark over him right now. He's being seen as more of a project kind of player. Like they're giving him a bit of rope to really stamp his authority. He hasn't really stamped his authority on any test matches just yet. He was incredible for the Hurricanes. Like very, very an outstanding player, and a guy who's basically been said, why aren't they picking this guy for the All Blacks for a good sort of 3 or 4 years now? So now he's got his chance. He hopefully will be able to kick on. I think the way he plays will suit a test like this. So I feel like he's going to get selected in this one. Simon Parker is a guy who I'm sure you probably hadn't have heard of. And you talk about your issues at number 8. I mean, if there was ever like a New Zealand player in a South African mold, this is the guy. He's basically been put on a road to becoming an All Blacks. It almost feels like specifically to play this game. because he's the big battering ram that they need to take on the Springbok forwards. He's I think 117 kgs and standing at 1 meter 97. So he's huge, huge guy. He would have been in the All Blacks right from the start, from the French series onwards, and it's a shame he wasn't, because he could have, kind of eased his way into Test rugby. But I feel like they're putting a lot of emphasis on this guy because he kind of feels like the missing piece that the All Black loose forward trios had, because you have, Ardie Savea and Wallace Atiti, two like generationally good players, but they're both not that big. Like they're mid-sized loose forwards. They're not like small as Quagga Smith, but they're not as big as a Jasper Wiese or a guy like that. So you need that extra big body in there, and they've had Tupou Vaa'i on the blind side there, and he's playing really, really well at the moment. He wasn't that great on the week. I mean, not really many of them were. But if I was going to say, anyone, I'd say Simon Parker, and hopefully he's a guy who's going to be, like a real weapon against the Springboks, from now on, because it's the one thing that the All Blacks have kind of been lacking over the last few years, and perhaps just given those results, it's the one thing they really need the most.
I think that's been informative. I'm going to leave you here because I know it's also late at night there by you, or not that late, but at night, and you've got a family. So, but I think we'll get you back, Jamie, next week. Maybe after the teams have been announced on both sides. Maybe get your thoughts on that as well as we head into the test. It'd be very good to chat to you again, and let's hope for an amazing test match. I think every single one of the 100 and something that's been here, 110 or whatever there's been, has been certainly something you could write a book about almost every single game. So thanks for joining me, mate. And hopefully we'll chat to you next week before the game.
Absolutely. Let's do it. Thanks, Brendan.
Okay. Cheers, Libby.